In this video, I just wanted to introduce people to the Find Look At rotation node, which is flavour of the month at the moment. I've been experimenting a little bit with this, and it's got some really fantastic practical uses. Ultimately, it calculates the reorientation of an actor or a component to another actor or component, and does all the heavy lifting for us. That can, of course, be the player. It can be one object looking at another object, and you can kind of play around with that and affect the kind of interpolation of looking from one thing to another as well. So in the little demonstration that I've created, I have got my main actor, which has got a scene capture component 2D, and if you don't know what that is, that's basically another form of camera which will capture the scene, which you can then, if you come here under texture target, and you can create a new render target. Once you have created that render target, all you need to do is right click on it and create material. And in my example here, this plane has that material applied. So here, RT camera track. So what that means is that when this camera updates, it updates that render target, which in turn updates that material. So here I am tracking this object. I've got a box collision here. So once my object goes into that box, it's going to switch a Boolean and say, look at this object. So reorientate this pseudo CCTV camera to this object. So if I move that in, and now you'll see that as I move, the camera is tracking the object and rendering it to this render target. So I've got a kind of Metal Gear Solid style camera very, very quickly and easily. And of course I can go and put that right up to the camera. And it's always going to track that position, basically, now that I have hit that Boolean. So let's just look at that very quickly. So scene capture tracking. I have got a is box tripped. Let me open up this little bit so you can see what we're doing. If you select and hit the home key, it should recenter your nodes, just as a useful tip. Is box tripped. So when in this case, the box sees that the other actor is my target blueprint, I'm setting is box tripped to true. So on true, we are setting the actor rotation, which is this actor self, and I'm basically taking the original position current and then taking the look at rotation to become the target, and then using an R-interp over an interp speed of 3 to tween from the current position to the target position. Now, of course, if I want that to be far more responsive, I can increase that interp speed and less floaty. A highly tuned CCTV camera operator, or AI. Again, depending on gameplay, you can make that way more latent. If you've poisoned your security guard, it might not be quite as responsive. So depending on your narrative, just being daft, of course, but why not? That could be part of the gameplay. Anyway, let's look at some other examples. In this example, I've got 9 spotlights tracking this object, just to kind of give me this very kind of motion graphics, generative and slightly abstract result. But I just wanted to sort of have a play around with it. I'm sort of tweaking the position of the tracked objects so that this updates. This is basically just projecting onto a plane, but because everything's dark, it kind of looks a bit more graphic. But I can, of course, interact with this and sort of play around with it. But I've just kind of played around with the levels so that I'm kind of getting this slightly more amorphous blob. I'm going to sort of play around with this to see if it can be driven by some data inputs and maybe affect the color as well, and be a bit more of a kind of abstracted data visualization in some form. But principally, it's doing exactly the same thing. Very simple blueprint for this. The spotlight, you'll see, is facing in the X direction. So that's important. If you want to orientate the find look at, it will be based on the X, which is forward looking at that location. So just in this case, I've created the spotlight in that direction, which is how it gets added as a component anyway. But a very sort of simple piece of script. So here in the construction script and the event graph, it's principally the same thing. This just in the construction script. So if I move my actor around, it updates. So let me plug that back in, because I've got the actor pipette as an instance editable reference. So it just means that I can select which actor in the world. And all I'm doing is getting this light actor here, which is my start, looking at the target, which is an actor that I can pipette in the world because I've exposed it, get the find look at rotation, and update this actor's rotation to orientate to the target on tick. So that's all that is. And then depending on how many lights you've got in the scene, you get different effects. And I've got 9, as I say. I pipetted, you'll see if I come to this light here, I've pipetted the target actor, which is this one here. And in the target actor, I've just got a v-interp for it to kind of move position automatically. And again, that would kind of run ad infinitum. A third example, which just takes that principle and scales it up, is where I have another object in the world, and I've now got, I think, 60 of these actors that are doing the pointing. I've still got a kind of random positioning on the target, but it's one target and it's all these actors looking at that. It's good fun just to sort of play around with and see what happens. I'm obviously getting quite op-arty results with this. I'm obviously moving around. This is all kind of in simulate mode, but just to sort of see what effect that has. All I've done, rather than having a spotlight, is I've just put a cylinder in, again, facing in the right direction, and then put an emissive material on it. Repeated that in a circle, have a target attributed to it, and again, if I move that target around, everything is, I'm using that as a means to point to that actor. Again, this could be a sort of data visualization, potentially. I might have a sort of play around with as well, where all these, the lengths of these lines varies. Again, it depends on what I use as data sets to kind of affect this. But, you know, it's kind of an abstraction. Sort of practical uses, I've used the find look at rotation, particularly in VR, when I've teleported from one position to another and I've just orientated things to face the pawn. So rather than finding yourself behind something in VR, you can kind of make it address the player and face the player. I've done that in my flock gallery example, particularly for VR. So I'll see if I can tap on the video that shows that now. So I hope that video is of use. If so, please do like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to receive any updates. And thank you for your support.